I guess we're going to check and make sure that this is up and running and working. Check. 1, 2. Do we have sound? Okay, sounds like we're getting some. All right. So they're going to be pulling. Okay, here we go. If you remember, I had mentioned last week, maybe even the week before, that we were going to give everybody an idea of what was going to be taking place on the trip to Israel, in case, again, even if some people weren't knowing for sure if they were going to go. This will give you an idea of exactly what we'll be doing. Or I shouldn't say exactly, because even on the trip that we took, there were some things that happened that we changed a little bit of the itinerary, but I started looking at this now. When we came back from this trip, we took 5 weeks at an hour per, and it took that long to get through. So I looked at the presentation that I had done and all the weeks together. There was about 450 panels in PowerPoint. So this is the very trimmed down version. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, just so that you can get a chance to see what exactly it is that we did on the trip. A couple of things too. Next week is communion. And so then the following week, I want to do something also, because it has been a significant last couple of weeks as far as prophetic stuff is concerned. And it's been a while since I've done kind of an update on just some of the things taking place and why our eyes should be open. One of them is not if some of you, maybe if you read about this, there is a moon thing that's happening tonight. I don't even want to call it a blood moon, because it's not. That's what everybody's calling it. And it's basically a lunar eclipse. And so it throws an interesting color onto the moon, but everybody's been thinking all kinds of stuff was going to happen in September. Well, aside from the fact that I had a birthday and an anniversary, it's been a pretty average September, as most are. So there's a blood moon happening tonight, and I had jokingly said, for all those people that think that the world is going to end, please give me all of your earthly goods, and if you want them back tomorrow when you wake up and we're still here, then I'll make you a deal on giving them back to you. Nobody took me up on it, unfortunately, but yeah, that was how I figured I would handle that whole thing. Well, Israel 2016. This picture here is taken from that's my daughter. Her little cup on the left, me in the middle, my wife on the right, and in behind you is the garden tomb. And so that was the picture that I took and used for this one. We will be back there. That's the last place that we visit before dinner and before heading off to the airport. And this trip will be much different than the last. There were 10 of us that got to the airport in Tel Aviv at 8 o'clock at night. But our plane didn't leave till 5:30 the following morning. Yes, and so we didn't even get to go to security until like 3:30. So in the morning. So from 8 o'clock in the evening till 3:30 in the morning, we stayed in the terminal at Tel Aviv, and nobody is there on Shabbat, Sabbath, Friday night. Like when nobody is doing anything because it's Israel, and they shut down Friday sundown till Saturday sundown. But we were stuck in an airport, and us and the zombies were the only ones awake. So anyway, this was how our day started. Now I'm going to do this I'm going to go through this quickly because I realize I only have about an hour with you. So let's have a word of prayer, and we'll start to look through this. I'll give you some details about the trip as we go through it, and if you are considering going, or just kind of on the fence, what I wanted to do was to let you know what it is that we're going to do, and hopefully kind of get you excited at the prospect of going and seeing this. It's a pretty amazing place. Father, we thank you for gathering us here this evening and thinking about the land where everything that we read in the Scripture took place there. We pray, Father, that you would give us understanding about the importance of this place and really the reason why we may want to see it. We pray, Father, that you would glorify yourself through this evening and that we would have a desire to see this place, and that for those that want to go, we pray, God, that you would make a way for them. So we give you thanks for all this. We pray that you'd glorify yourself in Jesus' name. Amen? Okay, from our hotel room, this I always thought was, this was one of the most interesting things. I looked out there. We are in Tel Aviv at this time, and you're going to see that word tel. It's going to be in a lot of the places, and a tel very simply means is one place that's built on top of another. So whenever you hear tel, it's built. This was taken from our hotel room the first night in Tel Aviv, and this thing here is called the Dolphinarium. This is really why they started to build walls around Gaza and the West Bank. And that was because people were able to come and go as they wanted to, and a Hamas terrorist came here This was a place where dolphin shows took place and all the rest, and they turned it into a nightclub in the evening. Now it's kind of more of a memorial. But a guy was walking around outside, and he was beating on a drum, and he said something's about to happen. His drum was filled with explosives, and he killed, I believe, 18 people there that night. Young people, basically in their late teens and 20s. And so they shut this down, and you can see they built a fence around it, but there's all kinds of graffiti, and I didn't know what this place was until the following day. I just thought it was an interesting picture. But this tells you why things are the way that they are and why Israel has built a wall. This is just a great picture. We have this down by the office there. We were walking from Tel Aviv, where our hotel was, down to Joppa. And I took this picture just as we're walking along the shoreline there, and that's the Mediterranean. So here was our first day. We started at Joppa. Tel Aviv would be right about here. And from Joppa, we went to a place called Antipatris. I'm going to show you the pictures. Antipatris from there, it's also known as Ephek. And we went from there up to Caesarea, to Mount Carmel, over to Nazareth. And by the end of the first day, we wound up at the Sea of Galilee. And so we stayed right in this area right here. And when we get to this area in within a few days, that's where we're going to be staying. Now, the place where we stayed was a place called Gennesaret, or we call it Naf Gennesar. And it's a little what they call a kibbutz. And a kibbutz is a common area that the people that run the place, kind of a hotel, they all live there. And they all have a stake in making sure that the place operates properly. So it's called a kibbutz. And we'll be staying at one over here at a place called En Gev. So anyway, as we look at this is Joppa. I'm sorry, that's in black. You don't see it really well. But Jonah, this is where he was, thrown up on shore. Book of Acts, this is the place where Lydia did her thing. This is Acts chapter 10 is where Peter saw the centurion and the guys that were there, his people rather. This all took place in Joppa. So very historical. Lots of things took place there. This is kind of where our day started. Now, there we go. From there we went to a place called Antipatris, and most tours do not go to this place. This was really amazing. So, gosh, I thought this was all in white. I'm sorry. Well, in the Samuels, this is where we see a place called Ephek. And this is where the Philistines would have staged as they were coming inland. Being that they were coastal, more of what Israel was doing was more inland. And so, interestingly enough, what you see here is a Crusader fortress from about the late 1000s. But the place that's known as Ephek is where the Philistines would have staged a place that we would have seen like 3 days later. This is where they would have marshaled their troops before they came up against Saul. But also in Acts 23:31, this is where Paul was brought on his way to Caesarea after his arrest at Jerusalem. So it's known as Antipatris. In Paul's times, it is known as Ephek during the times of David and the Philistines. So we got a chance to walk around here. There are more of them as you go up this way. But you see those little stones, those are all 2,000 years old, and they lead up that way. That would have been the road that you would have taken to Ephek coming from Jerusalem, which is kind of up over that horizon there. So when you're standing there, and we did it, we all put our shoes on one of the stones, and we took a picture. So we could say, these are our feet on 2,000-year-old stones and pavement. And so as they excavated this, at my back is the fortress that's there. Interestingly enough, there were also Egyptians were there at the time too. So what you find are ruins underneath, even from Saul's time, there was an Egyptian fortress at the same time, or a place where they would have been had residence, if you will. So these ruins are like 1500 BC. They were also in the area at Joppa. You'll see a replica of an Egyptian gate that was from about 12 to 1500 BC as well. So from there we went up to Mount Carmel. This was the first place where the hair kind of stood up on my arms when I went to Carmel because, we had to go to Caesarea first, didn't we? Caesarea. Caesarea, I thought I fixed all of this. My fault. I'm so sorry. Acts chapter 8, Acts chapter 10, we see that this is where Philip's family lived in Acts chapter 8. By Acts chapter 10, this is where Peter went to meet Cornelius. After his people came to get him at Joppa, they took him to the centurion here at Caesarea. And so this is where Peter and Cornelius would have met. By the time that chapter 12, this is where Herod Agrippa begins to talk about how wonderful he is, and he had that suit with the silver in it, and the robe rather, and oh, he's like a god. Well, this is where he got eaten up by worms. So by the time that Acts rolls around, this is where Paul went for his imprisonment. So this is amazing. When you stop to see the size of this place, by the time that I'm taking this picture, this is the ruins of the palace, but this is not just seating. This is where they would have had one of those big ovals, like, think of the races like they did. This is where that would have taken place. What was it, Ben-Hur? Remember where they're doing that big long thing? This is a big long oval. And so this is where they would have done the races. That out there is like, we're talking half a mile out that way. That's the other end of it. This place is enormous, but this is Caesarea. This was built by Herod the Great, kind of because he knew he was in a little bit of trouble with the Caesars back in Rome. So when you think that you're in trouble with the boss, build him a big palace. Hey, Caesar, look at what we did back there in Jerusalem or in Israel for you. And that was why they called it Caesarea, named after Caesar. This is the amphitheater, and we saw a couple of similar amphitheaters while we were there. This is the one that's at Caesarea, and I'll show you one that's also at a place called Bet Shean in a moment. This is kind of built back up. This gives you an idea of the scope of the palace. This would have been the main hall. There were a number of other rooms over here. Paul would have had his interrogation at Caesarea in these areas here. This is going out into the Mediterranean where the palace would have went out into the water. Now what you saw there where the original or the big palace is, that's kind of still on the normal land. This was built out into the water, and these are the ruins of the palace. All this rock formation and everything is not natural. It was all put out there so that this monument that Herod made to Caesar would be able to go out into the water. This is an aqueduct. It goes for 12 miles. How do you get water to a place like this? You have to have a natural source. This is aqueducting. The water came in that. It was 12 miles long. Talk about ambitious. It's just amazing. But so what you're looking at there is over 2,000 years old. Pretty amazing, huh? So it was the water supply. You'll be able to see all of this when we're there. From there, from Caesarea, we went up to Mount Carmel. And again, this is one of the places that amazes you because you're looking there at the Valley of Armageddon, or the Valley of Armageddon. This is also known as the Jezreel Valley, and it runs all the way off into Jordan. But this is where all of humanity gets put to an end by Jesus when he comes back. And so when that Battle of Armageddon takes place, this is the valley. It's beautiful. These are airstrips, Air Force things. But I'm standing on top of Mount Carmel. 1 Kings 18 is where the prophets of Baal and Elijah would have met. That's on top here. This is where it would have taken place. This was the high ground above. And down in here, if you look down this way, that's where the little brook would have been, where he took the prophets and put them to death. And so this looks kind of towards, this is the Mediterranean's kind of at your back this way. You're looking towards the southeast, looking towards Jordan. This is if you're looking out towards Nazareth. So isn't it interesting, whether you look at it from here, the Jezreel Valley, or as you'll see from there, we take a picture that way, either way, Jesus would have been able to look at the very place where he knew that at some day he'd come back and fight the Battle of Armageddon. So in his earthly incarnation, he would have seen with his own eyes. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that one. So from Mount Carmel, again, remember, this is all the first day. And we didn't feel in any way rushed. I see a few of you that went on the trip. Did any of you feel rushed during that? You had plenty of time at each one of them. You just felt like, okay, cool. So from there we saw, this is from the place called Precipice. This, they believe, would have been the place where they would have tried to take Jesus when he was teaching, and he said a prophet has no honor even in his own town, where they wanted to push him off the edge of the cliff, but he walked past them. This is Precipice, and you're looking at Nazareth. This is where Jesus would have grown up, Nazareth, of Galilee. And so as this is at your back, or as you're taking this picture, looking at Nazareth, at your back is the Valley of Armageddon, which is what you see. You're looking towards Mount Tabor from there. I had just shown you, if you're standing here, this is where Nazareth would have been. If you look out this way, there's Mount Tabor, all the way back to the book of Judges. This is where Deborah directs Barak to the battle that defeats the Canaanite general Sisera. So all of this is taking place. You're thinking 2,000 to 3,000 years from Jesus' time to when this was happening at the time of the Judges. So if you're looking at this point, if you're looking at Nazareth here, you're looking at Tabor there, and then you turn here, and here is the Valley of Armageddon, or Armageddon. Pretty cool, huh? You just, I mean, your eyes taking in all of this stuff, and why this was such a surreal thing. When I look out at the at that place, especially here, Jesus in his young years would be able to look out at the very same valley that after he would go and die at the cross, at some time he would come back as the conquering King of Kings and Lord of Lords and do battle at Armageddon right in the same valley where he grew up. There it is. From the Mount of Precipice, you're overlooking Megiddo. We looked at it from this direction. Over there was Carmel. And then here it is looking from Nazareth. This is that precipice where they would have probably wanted to throw him off. It's the only kind of real sheer cliff in the area where they may have wanted to throw him off. So it sure seems like this is in the general area of where that would have taken place. So in day 2, because we wound up at Nafghanistan, this was where we had our second day. This is the sunrise over the Golan Heights. We hear about that in the news all the time. I'll show some pictures of that in a moment. But I want you to realize that this is still so much like it was in those days. When you look across the Golan Heights, you don't see much in the way of development. So I want you to think about this. This picture that I took would have looked every bit as much at that time as what it would have looked like in Jesus' time, because this was his area of operation during his earthly ministry. So much of what he did was around a place called Caesarea, and this is where he would have done his Capernaum is where he would have done his earthly ministry. And it's right on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. So what you're seeing here is a sunrise that would have looked very much like the sunrises he would have seen. Pretty cool. So from there, we went to a place called Tabgha. John 21 is where Jesus appears to the disciples after his resurrection. There are things that we call A, B, and C sites. An A site would be a place that's like, if we are not standing right on the actual rock, take a look around, this is it, we're here. A B site is, well, this is kind of the general area. The C sites are like, well, it's disputed. This, folks, is an A site. It's an A+ site. In fact, this was, I think, the 4th century is when it was built, and they built some other things above it. But this shoreline, as you'll see it, well, that's not. There's a shoreline that goes right along here, and on this morning, whoever does it, whether it's myself or Daniel or Roger, will teach from John 21 on the shoreline where they would have been when Jesus walked along that shore and said to them, hey, you guys catching anything? You know the story, right? This is Tabgha. This is where that took place. So this is no question, this is the A site, and as you stand on the shore, you're looking this way and that way about 30 yards in either direction, and then you kind of run out of shoreline in space. This is where it would have been. So you know for sure that you're in the right place. This is from Tabgha, and if you're looking up into this valley, if you're going to go up that way, you're going to Jerusalem. If you're coming from Jerusalem into Galilee, you come through that. So we didn't get to it. Now I know that other tours go there. We may or may not be able to make it there, but this is the passageway that leads from upper to lower, down into the Sea of Galilee. So when you look up there, you just think, anybody that would have ever, even Jesus, those times that he would have traveled, this is the way he would have gone. Pretty cool. Now, from there, we on day 2, we made it to this is. I know I fixed this. This is Capernaum. This is the synagogue at Capernaum. I'll have some other pictures of it, but that right there, 1st century. This would have been the foundation of the synagogue where Jesus would have taught in his hometown. I mean, this is right where he was. What you're seeing there is 4th century. Now, we visited in that same day another 1st century that never had another one built over it at a place called Chorazin. So when I show you that, you can say 1st century, and I'll tell you something about that place that will blow your mind. We will be seeing that as well. But this is Capernaum. And I love this. This means, Capernaum means the village of comfort, Capernaum. So Nahum is peace, or comfort rather, and the Kapur means the village. So the village of comfort. And if you were here when we went through this the first time, as soon as Roger had said that, the village of comfort, my mind immediately went to Isaiah chapter 40, begins with the word comfort. And it goes from the first 39 chapters of Isaiah deals so much with judgment and the law and all that other stuff to only come to chapter 40, and the first word is comfort, and it is the establishment and the revealing of the Messiah. And so it speaks about Jesus, so it made perfect sense that Jesus, would be doing most of his earthly work in a place called the Village of Comfort. Just thought that was really interesting. So if you go and take a look at the word in Isaiah 40, what do you think you'd find? Nahum. It's taken from Nahum, comfort. So Isaiah 40, 1 through 5, comfort, yes, comfort my people, says God, speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry out to her that her warfare has ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received from the Lord's hand double for all of her sins. The voice of one crying out of the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight the desert highway for our God. And every valley shall be exalted, every mountain and hill brought low. The crooked places will be made straight, and the rough passes smooth. For the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Interestingly, that was the message of John the Baptist. Preparing the way for the Lord. This is Capernaum, and again from Matthew 4. It's being quoted from Isaiah 9, the second part of verse 1 to 2. By the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, in Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who walk in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them the light has shined. Here's where Jesus did his earthly ministry, prophesied that he would. Pretty cool, huh? Capernaum. Interesting place. These are all the miracles that took place that you could look at. I know that there's not enough time to go through them. I have all of these PowerPoints if anybody wants them. From the 400 or almost 500 different panels within all of our trip. If you're ever interested, and just say, can you give me those? And if you have a computer that reads PowerPoint, I'll give them to you. I was so excited going to this that I put that whole thing together, and I was just giddy getting a chance to do it. So exciting. But interestingly enough, when you see Gethsemane, we hear that word Gethsemane. Gethsemane means just simply olive press. So when we get to the Garden of Gethsemane in Jerusalem, just know that the functioning olive grove that's there, all of that stuff is indigenous to the north, and those were brought to Jerusalem from the north. Here is one of those places, and the Gethsemane is very simply a place where you would press olives to extract the oil out of them. Very simple. So there is what a Gethsemane looks like. It's where you would crush the olives and extract the oil. So you'll see that while we're there. This is an aerial view of Capernaum, and this is kind of where you come in, and then this is the synagogue that's there. This is the main part of the synagogue, 4th century, that you'll see. They've got the supports there, but they've rebuilt some of it from the ruins. And this is children's ministry in in Capernaum, because this was where the kids would be. It was in a separate part of the synagogue. This is the place where I just showed you those things. This is where the kids would have been. This isn't in the main synagogue, which would be through those doors. Here it is again, the picture, 1st century, 4th century. Amazing. Here's more of the olive presses there at Gethsemane. You'll be able to see all this stuff. They've done a very nice job of putting it all back together so that you get a good idea of the scope of where it is. This is where Peter would have been. This is where Peter's mother would have been healed when Jesus healed her. Now they think that they have found potentially her house, and they built a big monument over it like they always seem to do, because the Catholics did that. If it's not Catholics that build over holy sites, it's Muslims. And so you see that everywhere that we go. But interestingly enough, if it happens to be where Peter's mother would have been, it is like 30 yards from the synagogue. If that. I mean, it's just right there. Such an amazing thing. So, still in day 2, we went to a place called Chorazin. Notice the color of the stone. From what we looked at Capernaum, it was black. It's the stuff that's there. It's the volcanic stone. And so they built this. Now the amazing thing about it, when you look at it, you can see what is old and what is new. So these are the originals they built from the same kind of rock so that you can get an idea of what it looked like. This would have been up here. So that's closer to you. That's not right up against the stones. It's brought to the front of those steps. But, oh, hey, look. There's Deb. So anyway, this is a 1st century synagogue. And when Jesus said, "Woe to you, Bethsaida, woe to you, Chorazin, for had the miracles that took place in you happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, they would have repented." One of those places. Interestingly enough, this is what they found. Now, this is a replica, and you can see this. We probably won't go to the Israel Museum this time, because there's not enough hours in the day. You could spend a whole day and not really even see everything that's there. So we're going to take that time rather than go there, and we won't go to the Israel Museum. But if you did, you would see this. It's what they call the cathedra, or the seat of Moses, or the rabbi's seat. This is where the rabbi would sit to teach. Now, the one that they would have found at Chorazin is the one that he would have sat on when he taught there. There were over 200 synagogues in that general area, and the Scripture says that he taught through all the synagogues in the Sea of Galilee area. So yeah, do the math. This is a first century synagogue with a first century cathedra, and yes, Jesus would have sat there when he taught. Pretty cool. So if you're walking around the floor of Chorazin, you're walking on the floor where he taught and walked and did all of what he did. So from there, on that same day, we got a chance to see this. It's a 2,000-year-old boat. There were some things taking place around the time. They noticed, gosh, that wood that's out there in the water looks old. And the more that they looked at it, they realized that this would have been a boat from Jesus' time. And so interestingly enough, depending on how many of the disciples would have been out fishing, this would have been one of the fishing kind of boats. It's amazing. They have a whole story on how they actually got it up out of the ground. It's pretty amazing. And you're not supposed to take pictures in there. But somebody did, and I went ahead and nabbed it. I didn't take the picture. Somebody did. We put together a whole thing where you could upload all of your pictures from the trip, and it helped me put together. See, I didn't take the picture because that would be wrong. But one of the other sinners on our trip took one, and so I went ahead and took it. But you get to walk around and you walk all around this and look at it. And then we jump on a boat and we go across to this side. This is where En-Gev is. Those are the Golan Heights that you see that are so much contested. So we jumped on this boat and went across. Now, remind yourself that when Jesus would have been going back and forth across the water, this is the same body of water, that all of those miraculous things would have happened. The big storm that came up and just about killed them, when they came back and saw Jesus sleeping on the pillow and said, "Don't you know we're all about to die?" That's on this little body of water. And so we jumped on this boat, which is much larger than what they would have, and they didn't have motors at the time. I don't know if you're aware of that. They would have had to find other ways to use for propulsion, but ours did. And so here we are looking across the Sea of Galilee, Golan Heights, and what's at our back is basically Gennesaret, Naf-Gennesar, the area where we stayed. It's all so very, very small when you're there. You're just astounded at how, everything that we saw from the time that we got to Naf-Gennesar would be like traveling no further than like into the far parts of Long Beach or maybe into Anaheim. That's about it, really. I mean, it really is that small. Across the way here, when we got to En-Gev, this would have been where the man that was possessed with demons would have been, and he would have met them, and where Jesus made deviled ham. So, yes, I said it again. Yeah, I know. So, this is the place over here, and this is where we were able to have lunch. It is, now, see, we're going to be staying right in that area. There's a nice kibbutz there. The only downside to us staying on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee is that you will not be able to see the sunrise over the Golan Heights. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm looking forward to being on this side of it. It's going to be very interesting. And of course, what we do is we take buses to do all of this stuff. So what the bus did is met us over here at En-Gev. When we left from Gennesaret, we came across over there, and the bus met us after we had lunch, and so people were eating whole fishes. So I didn't do that because I don't like to eat things looking at me. It's just kind of weird that way. And so En-Gev, that was where we're going to be staying there from the looks of it. And from there, we went to the River Jordan because we were going to do a baptism. So we went to the bottom of the Sea of Galilee to a place called Yaredin, and that's where this was. And there we are in the very cold water. You can tell by the way that he's reacting and by the way that I'm taking my time getting in. So, yeah, that right about when you get there and it hits your belly, you just go, "Oh my gosh, this water's so cold." And so, yeah, but we had a bunch of people that got baptized. And interestingly enough, this is where Chuck thought, when we go to Israel, we want to be able to do baptisms. And so Chuck underwrote most all of the building of this, Pastor Chuck from Costa Mesa. And then, of course, gave it over to some people, said, we don't want this. This isn't for us. This is for the people to be able to use, not just Calvary Chapel, but anyone. And then they turned it into a big tourist thing, and just renting these will cost you $10. So, unfortunately, Chuck was even thinking about doing it in another place, and before he went to be with the Lord. But it's nice because you can just walk down into it, and I'm sure that you're all wondering, is it slimy when you stand on? Yes, it is. And so we did a bunch of baptisms here. This was very, very cool, being able to be baptized in the same river Jesus was baptized in. So the joke was, wow, you guys were in the same water? No, I think it's actually changed a little bit since then. It is a river after all. So from there, we, on the following day, I'll just go back to it, day 3, and I'm a half an hour in, we had 10 days. So I'm not doing so well on time. This is where the Beatitudes would have been taught more than likely. We know generally the area, but interestingly enough, when you're out here, it's kind of an amphitheater. And so it's natural. The acoustics of it, though they have it kind of blocked off now, if you were just out here in the field and he would have been up here, he would have been able to speak and you would have heard. Or even in reverse, it could have been speaking up into the hill. But either way, the acoustics of it would have been great. And if you haven't noticed by looking around here, if he was able to say, consider the birds of the air, consider the lilies, consider the things that you see, he would have been able to use everything as an object lesson. So I believe that when he was speaking the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, consider the birds, that they neither toil nor they spin, yet God provides for them. Well, they would have been right there. So when he says, behold, he would have been able to say, behold. Or the lilies, behold, the grass. It's right here in front of you. It's a great visual. So this is the Mount of Beatitudes. And so we were able to talk about the Sermon on the Mount there. Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5 to 7. You're looking out at the Sea of Galilee. This would have been the area where we had been staying. So this is a little bit further to the north. So from there, we went to a place called Caesarea Philippi, and those of you who were here remember the day that we recorded those videos. I think you showed them while we were in Israel. We recorded them and sent them home. That was the little greeting that I had for all of you guys. This is the gates of hell, when Jesus said that the gates of hell will not prevail against you. But all the way back to Judges, it identifies this place as Baal Hermon, or Lord of Destruction. So this was always a place that had a spiritual significance to it from the pagan side of things. And yet here Jesus goes right to the place where it was known so much for its idolatry, and he basically said, gates of hell? Not going to prevail. They won't win. So here we had a chance to look at it. These are the headwaters of the Jordan, one of the 3 tributaries that start the River Jordan. So natural springs that come out. In fact, from history, we understand that the water used to come forth from here, and that's why there used to be offerings that were made where they would give offerings into that water, and if the animal came back out, then it wouldn't have been accepted. But if the animal ended up drowning in there, that they would think would mean that their offering was accepted. It's really a strange place when you think about it. The water goes out, and this is the temple of Pan. And so when you look here, this is where they would put their idols, and this would have been the place of worship, but it would have been just kind of up into the mountain. So when Jesus says to Peter, the gates of hell will not prevail, from Matthew 16, it's right here. So again, he's using imagery that was all around him to be able to say, Peter, you have said rightly that the Son of the living God. Remember, that's all of what he said. And then Jesus was able to say the gates of hell will not prevail. Now, this is not the place where Jesus made Peter the first pope. But that's what's taught. Now, I'm serious. I'm serious when I say that. Because they will say that when he said that you'll have the keys of the kingdom and all that, the rest of it, where he said that on this I will build my church, this is where he would have said that. This is not where the Roman Catholic Church began, though that's what they'll tell you. So again, notice the place of the idols, where all that would be, and the gates of hell themselves. And I'm taking this from where that water was that I was showing you. So from there, we got to a place called Tel Dan. And so you may be asking yourself, well, what did you tell Dan? Well, Dan wasn't there, so we didn't tell him anything. So we're talking Dan, one of the original tribes, okay? That's who we're talking about here. This would have been the northernmost part, and when I say northernmost, you'll be blown away at what northernmost means. Why this picture? Well, it looks like, here's Roger, about 6 feet tall. This isn't more than about maybe 12 or 18. Well, that's Gershon. And here he is standing next to it, and there's more of the wall below him than has been excavated, but they felt if they dug lower, they might make it unstable. Because you figure this is 35 to 4,000 years old, parts of it. So Tel Dan, big place. This was a fortress. As you'll see some of this, this is where the gates, this is where you enter into the city. This is when you ever hear, they talk about the men at the gates, and they discuss things, and this is where adjudication would take of things. This is where the elders would sit and adjudicate things. Or Proverbs, when it talks about that wisdom could be personified in the gates where wisdom is spoken. This is the beginning of, and so you walk in. There's all these switchback. If you notice, people are going up this way. This is how places would have been built in those times, where it's not just some big wide open thing, because if armies invaded, you don't want to make it easy for them. So they would have to do the switchbacks, and so you walk around, and notice if you're not careful where you step, you could twist an ankle. So it would go this way, turn back around this way, you'd go up around, and it all winds through. What's interesting about Dan is this right here. From 1 Kings, Jeroboam sets up the altar in the high places at Dan, and the reason he did this was because he didn't want any of the children of Israel to go down to Jerusalem. And this was the counsel that he got from those guys. Look, you don't want them going to Jerusalem, because if they do, they'll stay, and they will stay with Rehoboam. So what you must do, build an altar so that they themselves can worship. Put one here and put one at Bethel in the southernmost portion. Well, the problem is, what he built there was not worship of Jehovah, but it was a worshiping of the same gods of Egypt. And I am convinced that that's the reason why God's ire and anger was raised towards them, was because of this idolatry. This is my wife sitting in the high places at Dan. And that is the actual foundation stone for the altar at Dan, 3,500 years ago. Pretty amazing, huh? They found it. So, from here, notice again, these are the same kind of stones from all the building. This is the walls. You're looking into Lebanon right here. In fact, these are the trenches. And that right there, that's the border to Lebanon. This is the trench where they were fighting in the 67 war. This is the northernmost part of where Israel has a defensible border with Lebanon. And so when we looked out, again, there is your border of Lebanon, and we're still in Tel Dan, and that right there is the southernmost town in Lebanon, and it is wholly, completely run by Hezbollah. And that is always being surveyed. But here's the interesting thing. When you look at it here, notice how flat that is? You will know by looking at how flat that is why the invading armies into Israel always came from the north. Because it's flat, and you can march a huge army through it. This right here, see that arch? That dates back to the time of Abraham. So if you believe, as people would tell you, that the Romans perfected arched doorways, about 2,000 years after the fact. That goes back to Abraham's time, 4,000 years ago. More than likely, that was probably the eastern gate that Abraham would have gone out to go after Lot. Very possible. But, of course, they've put this over it because they're trying to keep it from being damaged. They don't let you get right up to it. They keep you away. That's really significant. So from there, we get to the Golan Heights. So what you're looking at here, amazing, you're looking down into Syria at that point. When you hear the Golan Heights being talked about, right here as you look this way, you're looking out into Syria. Damascus would be out this way. If you just turned a little bit this way, that's when you're looking at Lebanon that I just showed you the picture. You're right at the end of the mount of, you're right at the end of the Golan Heights, and you're looking out into Syria. And then this picture here is, I'm waiting for something to happen. So he's firing there. They're just big metal cutouts. Here's Ed being arrested by one of them. But when you're looking at the Golan Heights, I just showed you that picture. You're looking to Syria. From this perspective, here is Lebanon. Right out there is Mount Hermon. That is the northernmost place in Israel. And they do ski there. just out off this way is Damascus. There's some of the things you hear about ISIS and the things that they're doing somewhere in the area of the Golan Heights. They've been in this area, and there's little towns down in this area. They're active in that area. They're not doing a whole lot. Everybody's kind of watching one another. And frankly, since you hear people always talking about giving back things to the 67 borders, and Israel says, not a chance, because of where I'm standing, do you see the strategic value to having this? Israel's not giving it back. It's not going to happen. So, from there, we went south. We got a chance to see a few different things. We got to Megiddo, and I think I've got something out of sequence here because I'm seeing Bet Shean, but I haven't shown you Megiddo yet. So, Bet Shean, let me see what I've done here. I may have really... This is what happens when you try to put together like 300 photographs. Let's see. Oh, see, yeah, I maybe I did. You know what? I didn't goof up so bad. Okay. I think I may have these a little bit out of order, but this was all on the same day because we were leaving from Galilee. We were coming down. So, yeah, Bet Shean. Yeah, so this is the correct way. First place that we hit was a place called Bet Shean. How many of you guys have heard the term the Decapolis? The Decapolis. Okay, those were the 10 cities of the Roman Empire that were in the area of Israel and even to the east. So when you get out into Jordan, the cities of the Decapolis were out there. Bet Shean is the only one that was west of the River Jordan. That's why it's in Israel. This is a visual of Bet Shean from up from space, not even from space, but just from a helicopter. This is very interesting because that's where Saul's head was put on display along with Jonathan's when they were killed by the Philistines, and I'll show you where that took place. But from there, this is just kind of a layout of it. This would be the amphitheater. There was an arena that was here too. This is where you come into the complex, but this place was massive. And very amazing. It's one of the Decapolis cities again. And you're just looking at it here from up above. This is the main road into it. This is where the military parades and all the rest of it would have been. But this is the hill out here from 1 Samuel 31. This is where the Philistines displayed Saul's head, where David went to go get it. And that whole story is there, where he died at Mount Gilboa. If you ever wonder, how do you move those big rocks? This is how you move the big rocks. Put wood wheels on the other side of it and push it into place. Cool, huh? So here is just a hallway looking into the amphitheater. And here again, if you remember, that looks a little bit like what they had at Caesarea. And it might not look that big until you see this. That gives you an idea of the size of it. Now, Roger was down here teaching. I'm one of the guys up here somewhere. I was up there, kind of away from... Oh, that's me. It looks like I'm crying. I wasn't, in case anybody's wondering. Roger was talking with an inside voice. He wasn't yelling, no amplification, no nothing. The acoustics were that good. So he was able to just speak, no amplification. You had no trouble hearing him. But that's why the amphitheaters were made for plays and all the rest of it. So the acoustics were like that. Same way at Caesarea. It's just amazing. These are original. These are mosaics right there in the ground that are, more than 2,000 years old. And they're all over the place. This is the men's room. And so here is where you could clean your hands. And here's where you'd sit. So the further upstream, the better off you are for cleaning your hands. Seems really primitive to us. This was uptown to them. So the lesser people were further down the line. The real important people were up there. And yes, those are toilet seats. This is the Cardo, and the Cardo, when you see them, there's another one in Jerusalem I'll have a picture of. This is the heart of the city, and this is where they would have come in. Notice the crown of that, so that water would drain off either way. These columns were put back in place, but this would have been the royal place where the parades would happen. This was the big deal there at Bet Shean. And again, there's that mountain where they would have displayed Saul's head. So here it is again. This is that picture that we have down the hall. That picture that of the Cardo, and yeah, those are original stones, a couple thousand years old. That's that same stone that you saw from Chorazin, if you recall it, the dark. So from there we went to Mount Gilboa. This is also the same place we call Gideon's Spring, right? En Herod. So this is the place where Gideon had his thing. In fact, that's where the water comes up from Gideon's Spring. The water comes up out of the ground and runs out into the valley. So you can actually see the same place where Gideon had the guys go get the water, still produces water to this day, but it's also the area where Saul was put to death. Now, in your mind, think of this. This is, the whole thing with Gideon was at a different time than Saul, because Gideon's, further into the future. But so much happened at the same place. Even what I told you about Antipatris, when they came and killed Saul at Gilboa, they started at Antipatris or Aphek and then moved east to come into this area here. So this is what all took place. This is where the water originates from. And so this is 1 Samuel, is where Saul and his sons were killed. They started at Aphek and then wound up at Beth Shean after they had killed him. So that's all that history all happened. And so when we were here, I thought, wait a minute. If the Philistines started at Aphek, just 3 days later, we're standing at the place where they wound up and put Saul to death. I mean, just like it all kind of comes together. This is where the spring is behind. This is where the water goes out in. This is where the guys would have had the drink of water when God said to Gideon, here's how I want you to pick the guys. The ones who would reach their hand down in to grab the water, those are your men. The guys that would stick their face in the water and do that, they are not paying attention. You don't need them. I only need 300 guys, is what God said, because, by the way, you're not fighting the battle. And this is the right and the wrong way to do it. These guys were hilarious. They were part of our group. They're from LAX, and they'll be coming with us again. He didn't drink the water because there are parasites in it. You'd have gotten sick. So he's just trying to demonstrate the wrong way to do this. He would have been sent home right after. Judges 6 through 8, this is where God delivers the Midianite army into the hands of Gideon. So from there, we got a chance to go to Tel Megiddo. And this staircase here is from Solomon's time. Solomon would have had a building here. He would have had things that he had done there. This would have been a place where he would have gone to. So Tel Megiddo is an interesting place. This is, they just show how some of it was built up. There's a little model that you have. And most of these places have little scaled models where you can look at how they actually were. These things here, these timbers, they are, everything built above them was using the same rocks from the ruins just to show you the size of it, but everything below is original. So whenever you would get to those places, you'd be able to see what was found when they excavated, and then everything that was above was to let you know that we just added it on for dimension. What are we looking at here, folks? The Valley of Armageddon. The Valley of Har Megiddo. So yeah, Megiddo is in the same part of the Jezreel Valley. It's just another perspective. Now look at this. This is interesting because the way that they did this, when they started to excavate, if you have something that's built like this, a tell is usually going to be built like this. But if you just start erasing and removing pieces of it, then everything that was there gets wiped out. Megiddo is one of those places that they cut it like a cake. And so you're able to see the layers. They counted 19 layers of civilization at Megiddo. This right here, that's a high place dating back to about Abraham's time. So that's where they would have offered sacrifices and things like that, all that far back. And then the further that you go down, the older, and then the newer is up towards the top. Close-up of the high place. And then this is, I have that picture, whenever you think Jesus was born in a manger, this is a manger. Some of them, I suppose, would be made out of wood if they were going to have straw, but if it was for drinking, they don't fit well in wood, so they would make them of stone. So this gives you an idea of the size proportion. They put these things back in place, but there was a stable at Megiddo, and there was a series of these things. Now, we found out from our tour guide, it was very, very interesting, one of the things that they would do, and why would they put a child in one of those things as a kind of a cradle? Well, and it still goes to this day, so it's not tradition, it's still carried on by the Bedouins to this day. In their herds, they will not feed one particular animal in the cooler nights. They won't feed one or even several of the animals, depending on how many children that they have, and they will muzzle them. But the animals know to come back to the place where they would eat, but if they're muzzled, they'll still linger at the food, but not eat. But what they will do is breathe on the kids. Keeps them warm. Yeah, pretty amazing. So, This is that same thing that I have down the hall. This is when you see Jesus was lying in a manger. Can you imagine the Jesus who spoke everything into existence condescended to spend the night in something like that because man needed to be saved? Unbelievable. If you ever ask the question, does God love me? Remember that. So from there we went to a place called Qumran, and this is where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now here's an interesting question. The caves where they found these, who would live there and how would you get there? Look at all that. And then even the roof caved in. So do you have an answer for that? How could this possibly be a cave where people could have come and gone and done things? Because of that. Erosion. That used to be ground level. So for those people that say millions of years, really? This has happened in about 2000. Notice this, though. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in these caves. They were hidden to keep them from the destruction by the Essenes. That was a group of very zealot people. They were zealous for the law. By this time, 70 AD, it's on the horizon. The Romans are just laying waste to everything, and they're thinking, if we don't hide this stuff and they come, they'll just ruin everything. So they put them in caves. Again, I know that God had them do that because it was going to bring us the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what the Dead Sea Scrolls have done is shut up everyone who had ever said, oh, the Bible isn't true because it's been rewritten so many times. Compare the Dead Sea Scrolls to what you have in your hands right now, and you will find that God preserved not only the Dead Sea Scrolls, but His Word, and uses these scrolls as evidence. This area is dotted with these caves. You see them everywhere. So this is Qumran. It looks out into the Dead Sea. And this is where we stayed at the Dead Sea. This is taken from our hotel room. There's a few of them here. Right over there. Yeah, that's a McDonald's. One of the few McDonald's that you can actually get a cheeseburger. So there you know it. All right? If you try to go and ask them, here's one of the things I found out that was very, very difficult. If you try to get a cup of coffee and just say, can you give me a cup of coffee and leave some room for cream, they'll look at you like you're from another planet, or at least from the United States. And you can't just get a cup of coffee and ask for creamer. So I found that you ask for an Americano. So I don't know if that was a snub or what, but there's a place in there where we ended up getting coffee, and we walked down there and watched people eat. Their burgers are like manhole covers. I've never seen burgers quite that big. So anyway, this is the Dead Sea. And so from that, our second day, we stayed the night there. Next day we woke up and we went to En-Gedi. Now here are the places. Samuel talks about David and Saul. This is where he would have met Saul and cut that little bit of his robe. Zechariah chapter 14, this is where it's spoken about that after Jesus steps foot at the Mount of Olives and it breaks open and water flows out to the Dead Sea, it'll come through areas like En-Gedi. So as we walked up through there, here again, these are those caves. These are the kind of places. You may very well be looking at the cave where David encountered Saul, or Saul came in and David was hiding there and cut that little bit of his robe. You may be looking at it, though we don't know which one it would be. You might be looking at the very same cave. Lots of natural water comes out. These hills are just so arid, but the above comes down into the valley. And so there you are looking out at the Dead Sea, and it's just so picturesque. This water is coming down and flowing into the Dead Sea. Just so unbelievably beautiful. It's just some of the pictures. Cool waterfalls. This is you walking back from where those pictures were. You're seeing the Dead Sea at that point. From there, on our way back down, we came to Masada. Fascinating place. Built by Herod the Great, never even went there. This was the place where they just decided to get rid of all the malcontents that were in Jerusalem at the time. So this is where they all went. And when all the persecution began to happen around 70 AD, a number of very devout people came to Masada. It's an amazing place when you think about it because, look, it's all defended. There's no way to walk from anywhere else. This right here, that is the remnant of a 2,000-year-old siege ramp that the Romans built just so that they could conquer this flat area here. Interestingly enough, water came in this way. It was hidden at a time, and they were able to get fresh water there. The Romans couldn't figure it out. How in the world are these people getting water when we're all dying? Those are barracks from that 2,000 years ago. And if you look at the picture that I have down the hall, they built a wall all the way around this so that nobody could escape. because they wanted to totally wipe out Masada. And so they built this siege ramp. Now, it's hard to tell from this, but the high level is here, and this is down into the Dead Sea. So they don't build it from the low to the high. They use the natural incline of the mountain to almost build like a bridge. But they spent more than 2 years building this thing. So when you're walking around there, you're looking down at the tram from where we came up. This would be the footpath. So the army from Rome wouldn't have been able to walk that up. They'd have been pummeled. They would have just thrown rocks over and killed them. So what do? You build the siege ramp. This is looking from Masada out towards the Dead Sea. Great picture of a flag. This is what you see from the top. Remember how we saw that from the aerial? This is that siege ramp that was built by Silva and the legion from Rome because they wanted to destroy it. These are some of the catapult rocks. They would just throw that stuff up just because, and they're everywhere. For a while, because as tradition says, the people that lived in Masada were taunting the Romans so long that they started to go get the family members from Jerusalem and use the catapult to toss them up as a way of saying, you want to make fun of us? Here's Uncle Harry. So, this is the room here where they found the little pieces of pottery with the name of the 12 people that saw to the death of all of the people who were there before they killed themselves. So history recorded that that's what took place, and the last 12 people, this is where they found their pottery pieces with their names on it that are on display in the museum. This here, that's original. Everything below it is how they found it. They added this on again for texture and for size and scope and all that stuff. Amazingly, according to the historians, there were, I think, 2 women and 3 children that they did not have record of being put to death. And interestingly enough, when they excavated, one of the massive cisterns there had skeletons of 3 children and 2 women. Interesting. They didn't find it till the excavations. So more of it. This just gives you an idea. It was a little warm that day. On a hot day, it's well over 100 degrees there. And yes, you cannot sink in the Sea of Galilee. Thank you, Dead Sea. Yes. Lowest point on earth, by the way. Lowest place on earth. So notice, hands are out of the water, feet are out of the water. You can't sink. I don't care what you do. I suppose if you took one of the rocks from Masada and put it in your lap, yeah, well, it probably would. But it's amazing. It's so heavy with mineral. You walk out and you just feel what it does to your skin. It's amazing. It's very therapeutic. You can reach down and grab the sand, and after you get past the top layer of just regular looking sand, it's white, like salt, like mineral. And here's the most hilarious thing. This shows you the innovation and how they're so good at marketing. They will sell you buckets of the sand from there, and you put it all over your body, right? And so you stand there and let the stuff dry, and it takes everything out. It does such wonderful things. What do? You walk right back into the sea, and it all comes off. You get the picture? Somebody's got to come around and dredge it right back up. They just keep reusing the same stuff, man. So anyway, you don't want to get it. They will tell you don't shave for like 1 or 2 days if you're a guy, because as soon as that water hits your face, you're gonna want to die. So ladies, they tell you don't shave your legs and or your underarms, and guys, don't shave your face. So we're looking pretty burly by the time that this comes around, and we all couldn't wait to go take a shower and shave. So a Dead Sea, and so from there we made our way towards Jerusalem. These are this became a very funny thing. What are those? No, they are not. Dromedaries, because they have 1 hump and not 2. I feel so educated now that I know this. So you can dazzle your friends. This is not a camel. This is a dromedary because it has 1 hump. Yeah. Oh boy. Beersheba. When you hear the Bible say from Dan to Beersheba, it's saying the northernmost part to the southernmost part. Not necessarily of the territory, but of what was settled. So Beersheba is ancient, all the way back to Abraham's time and on. And then here, as you're looking out that way, you're starting to look out towards like the Gulf of Oman, you're looking out towards Saudi Arabia, and then more to the south towards Egypt. So you're down a long ways. And by this time, we are within range of rockets coming out of Gaza. Yeah, you're that close. Now, again, if one of those sirens went off, it's not because they were a good aim. It's just they don't know where it's going to go. They light the fuse and go, I have no idea. But you can get underground. There's always a place to get underground. And this is one of the few places that really was within range. We never even gave it a thought. These are some of the ancient stones. There was this again, they will always build on top and let you know. But think of all the things that took place. This was the home of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They came this far south. In 1 Samuel 8, Samuel, the prophet, this is where he appointed 2 of the wicked sons to be judges here. So his kids, this is where they were. Josiah commands the high places throughout Judah to be destroyed. So this is one of the places where even idolatry got all the way into the south, and Josiah wanted it gone. So you can read about all of this. It is all throughout their history. And these are, again, original streets, original stones, thousands of years old. Everywhere you look, ruins that are thousands of years old, and you're looking out into the southernmost portion of Israel, kind of to where it ends. And interestingly enough, we sent Brittany to her room. We all had our little Bob the Builder hats on. Well, I actually had my Gilligan thing going on. But this is a replica, and the original is also in the Israel Museum. This was one of the altars that was there. Those would be the horns of the altar, as you heard talk about. This is where they would be offering sacrifices, and that's a replica. But again, the original is in the Israel Museum. And interestingly enough, there is the Bet Shean that is, or Beersheba rather, that is ancient. Then there's the Beersheba that is modern. And they're right there, and there's a train right between them. Isn't that interesting? Came right by us. So from there, we went to, this is what they call the Valley of Elah. This is the place where David and Goliath would have had their fight. Up this way is Bethlehem, and I'll show you a picture of that. It's over the horizon. This would have been where the encampment of Israel would have been because it's inland. Now, when you look at it from another perspective, here again, this is Succoth, or the Valley of Elah. This is where David defeats Goliath. This would have been where David would have come running off the hill. This would have been the flat area where he would have collected the stones as he's running this way to meet Goliath. This is looking up over that horizon is where David would have brought the cheese. And so Jesse would have said, here, go take this plate of cheese and find out what's going on with your brothers. They would have been up here. This is the lower part of the valley, and it runs out this way to where the Philistines would have been. This is your perspective. And so there's a little bit further away. This would have been the encampment. The valley would have been below. David would have come running down this hill to say, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he would mock the armies of the living God? Let me at him. And where he would have collected his rocks is right down here to meet David, or to meet Goliath in this valley. Amazing. So, interestingly enough, as you read the story, it says that he went to meet him, and it's hundreds of yards this way to start running up the hill to go after Goliath, and that's exactly what he did. He didn't wait for Goliath to even get into the valley. And so that looks towards, this is where the Philistines would have been, Israel would have been here. This is the valley. Can you imagine? I mean, you're in the valley where that took place. Isn't that crazy? So, Bet Shemesh. This is the place where Samuel would have been doing his, not Samuel, but Samson would have been doing his thing. And so you can see this is where the ark returns. I think I have a picture from that perspective. Yeah, you're looking towards the Mediterranean. So remember when everything was going bad for the Philistines? We got boils, we got this, we got that. It's all the ark's fault. Send it back. Put it on a cart, and if it goes back to where it came from, then we'll know that God is cursing us. This is where it would have come from. It would have been coming that way. So this is where it would have come to. Can you imagine being those guys? What is that? It's a cart with the Ark of the Covenant. I wonder what happened. Well, ask the Philistines. They'll explain it. But this is where Samson was just ruining life for all the bad guys. Is right in this area. And so from there we went to a place called Latrun. You see all these holes here? Think the wars. This is a high observation area that Israel tried 3 times to take back so that they could get supplies during the 48 war to the people that were trapped in Jerusalem. And so this was where there were tank battles, and they've made Latrun their tank museum. But you see everywhere there's holes all through this. Look at that. This is all the stuff with the Jordanians. Look at how many shells went in there. Amazing. Look at this one. They built plexiglass over it, but even that reinforced stuff, a load went right through it. So you see this. This is each one of the wars that have ever happened. Anybody that died in tank battalions, their names are commemorated here on this wall. And the road to Jerusalem, you're at a place called Scopus, and you're looking down into, you can see the dome there, you're looking at Jerusalem. As we come in, the first time, this is when we finally first see it, and then the following day we got up, we went to a place called Yad Vashem, and this is their Holocaust Museum. We will be going to this. This, you come in one end, and then you come out here. All of the memorial to what happened there is found there, but there is also this, and this is to the children that died during the Holocaust. This is a very somber kind of a thing. There's so much symbolism in this. These are all broken, even those, and it's a way of saying that they never got to a completion because they died before they could. Same with these barren rods here, same kind of a thing. So Yad Vashem, definitely a very surreal thing. Bethlehem. We hear people say that it is the world's largest, the West Bank is the world's largest outdoor prison. So it makes you think of a bunch of people, raking their cups across bars and talking about how awful it is. Well, wait till you see what it's like to live in Bethlehem. Remember that this is the place where King David, it's where his home was, but he was anointed there. It's also the birthplace of Jesus, and the book of Ruth. This is where Ruth and Boaz had their whole thing. So it's, very significant place. Now, this picture here is taken from what they call the Herodian. This is where they found the body of Herod. This is where he was buried. And they found his burial chamber recently. You're looking out into Bethlehem. So think about the announcement of the angels. Born to you this day in the city of David is a child, Christ the Lord. That would have taken place in this area. David tending the sheep when they basically said to Jesse, hey, do you have any more kids? After Samuel said, well, you paraded the 10 by, but none of them are this guy. And so don't you have another one? Well, yeah, there's one out tending sheep. That's where he was tending sheep. So, incredible. Also taken from the Herodian. This was Herod's swimming pool. That's a couple of 100 yards away. He was an amazing builder, but a complete knucklehead. This is interesting, too. Now, notice this, because it is such a hotly contested area that when the Pope went there, I saw this and about cried. Because here he is putting his hand and he's praying. Well, they do that at the Western Wall, not on the wall built around Bethlehem. And the reason that it's been built is because of the attacks coming out of Bethlehem towards people. That's why you have concrete. And it's not everywhere. It's only when it's close enough to roads and places where people can be attacked. That's when they put up concrete. But notice this, Bethlehem looks like the Warsaw ghettos. That's a way of, they're saying that, and that's what happened with the Jews were in those places. They were taken from places like the ghettos. So we need somebody to talk about justice. This was a disgusting photo op, and it made this was intended to make the Palestinians look like victims and the Jews look like monsters. This was very deliberate. And I'll probably talk about this in a couple of weeks. We'll get to that. I'm going to run out of time. Tell me if this looks like an outdoor prison. This was after we had come in. We went to a place that made olive wood things, and we're driving through Bethlehem. Look like an outdoor prison? Yes. Yes. How about that? Doesn't look like an outdoor prison. How about that? Looks downright metropolitan. The chili house. I wanted to stop and eat there. That looked really good. But this looks pretty metropolitan to me. There's not a Jew that lives in here. And there's only one Christian-owned business that does things like olive wood stuff there, and they're more the iconic. They're more the Coptic types. So how does that look for a prison? Looks pretty nice. Looking out over into, these are the high-rises, and these are also within Bethlehem. These are within the city limits. Here we are at the Herodian. This was another one of the palaces built by Herod, whether you want to look at Caesarea, or you look at Masada, or you look at the Herodian, all built by Herod. These were basically his escape routes if things ever went bad in Jerusalem. This is what it would have looked like in the palace, but then everything surrounded it. This would have been a replica of his burial chamber, which they found recently. And there again, his swimming pool. Amazing. So this is the main palace of the Herodian. And I've got to really, really hurry. So here we are in the last days of our time at Jerusalem. This is what we call the Triumphal Entry Road. When Jesus came in on the back of the donkey, as he gets towards the top of the hill, this is what he would have seen. Right here, That is what they call the Kidron Valley. Remember how often I say the Kidron Valley is more like a ditch. We think valley, we think Simi Valley. It's how many miles wide, how many miles long? That is the Kidron Valley. This here is half a mile, maybe. So the valley is not really a valley. It's just what we would consider a ditch. What Jesus would have saw is basically this part of the Temple Mount. This has been added on since. But this is what he would have seen. That wouldn't have been there. That wouldn't have been there. Dome of the Rock, Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we didn't get a chance to go there on this trip. Last one, I think we will probably be going on this one. We should hopefully be able to get up there and walk around the Temple Mount. But you got to really mind your P's and Q's, because they're just looking for a reason to get into a fight. So Jesus comes from Bethany to the temple. This is what he would have seen without all of this, but this is where the old city was. This is the largest Jewish cemetery on the planet, and those are graves. When you look at it from the other direction, you're looking up at the Mount of Olives. There it is, and it stretches all the way around the Mount of Olives. Amazing. This is where Jesus sets foot, and it splits open. This is the Garden of Gethsemane. This up here, Mount of Olives. So when Jesus was looking, he was looking down into Jerusalem as he came in on his entry. This would be what we would call the precipice of the temple, or when the devil said, "Throw yourself off of here, because God will not let you dash your foot against a stone, but he'll give you angels." This is where he would have taken to him, the pinnacle of the temple. East Gate. This is when Jesus comes in. He'll be coming in. The East Gate is under all of this. It's down here. But that's the top part. That's the East Gate. When Jesus comes back into Jerusalem as the King of Kings, he'll do it. The Muslims have their own cemetery here, and they figured that no Jew in his right mind would be walking across the cemetery. So they buried a bunch of Muslims there. Not a problem when you're God. You'll probably just part the earth. Maybe when he splits it in two at the Mount of Olives, it'll probably break right to the East Gate. Who knows? This is where all of Solomon's wives lived. It's called the Hill of Evil Counsel, or the Hill of Evil Speaking. And you're seeing this from the Mount of Olives, but that's where all of Solomon's wives lived. Here again, we're lower down. This is almost the Garden of Gethsemane. You're just above it. By the time you get in the Garden of Gethsemane, you're looking up to it. We're just above it at this point. You're looking over towards Caiaphas' house, where Jesus, from his arrest, just about where we are, a little bit down this way, is where the Garden of Gethsemane was. So when they arrested him, they took him along this way, and then they walked him up that way. So, Garden of Gethsemane, this is a 2,000-year-old plus olive tree. This is all dead. That is not alive anymore. One thing about it is if the roots don't rot, that tree is still viable, even if the outside is dead. You see that? What are those? Branches. And as soon as I saw this, I had to take the picture, because what came to my mind? The book of Ephesians chapter 2. You who are alive, you are now made, who were dead are now alive in Jesus. First thing that came to my mind. So, dead but alive. All that you need is a little bit of daylight and an opening, and it'll shoot right back through the old dead stuff. Amazing, huh? Jesus goes to Gethsemane and he's arrested. Remember what a Gethsemane was? Olive press. This was an active olive orchard. If you want to, I don't know if do they call them orchards? Here's a picture of the Eastern Gate. This is not dating to Jesus' time. The actual one is down below this, probably some 60 feet or so. The old city. This is what it would have looked like in David's time. Here's where you can see it kind of now. This is the way that it's the inclination of it is here, and then the temple was built up above it. So these are actual from City of David, so 3,000 plus years. This is actual City of David kind of stuff. These are the ruins. It's right in the heart of Jerusalem, and you look down into the Kidron Valley. Right through the middle of Jerusalem is what they call the Tropian, or the Cheesemaker Valley, and then that would be right like here. Back over there, you see this little hillside? That's the valley I was talking about this morning, the Hinnom Valley, or the Valley of Gehenna. It's there. They all three meet right out here. So the Kidron, the Tropian, and then the Hinnom Valley, they all meet right down there at the bottom. Amazing. So more City of David, and you can see how they built with the new, with the old. So more of that. These are the water tunnels. 1 Kings, and then Isaiah 39. This is when the Assyrian army was coming. They needed to bring water into the city, so they got it from the Gihon spring. You get to walk through that. It was made by hand. And you can see they moved from both directions to try to meet in the middle. They almost made it. They had to cut a little, a cross thing. They didn't quite meet in the middle. But we walked through this. Now you need a flashlight or it's pitch black. So you have a little flashlight and you're walking through and you're about below your knees. You're walking in water. And it's kind of chilly, but it's pitch black. And it's so cool. You get to walk the whole tunnel, the whole water tunnel. And it emptied into this place right here, the Pool of Siloam. This is where Jesus healed the blind man in chapter 9. On the other side of this, that whole pool could be excavated, all of it. But this just shows you the political dynamics. The people that own this on the other side are so afraid of the uproar and what could happen to them if they give it back, if the Muslims know that they have sold it to the Jews for excavation. So they won't sell it. They won't give it back over. But the Gihon Spring coming through Hezekiah's tunnel would have emptied here so that even when the Assyrians came and encamped around, they had a water source. These are original steps. And this is how you would have walked down into that pool. There it is from up above, walking down in. On the other side of that is all of it. They could excavate this entire pool, but there's all that fear. Western Wall. These are original to Herod's temple. So 2,000 plus years old. These are original stones. You notice how they get smaller as they go up because they were added in after. Same kind of stone, but these are the originals. When you look at it from above, there's the iconic Western Wall. This is the Mount of Olives. That's all that stuff over there. So on the other side of this fence is what we would call the Kidron Valley. And so that's the eastern, the western, southern steps are over here, and then the garden tomb is over here. So I'll show you those really quick. This is underneath. Now, from what you saw, let me go back to it. This here is all original, but this temple wall goes under all of that modern and after the times. All of this was built on. They started going under and excavating all along there. And that's where these pictures are. This is called the Rabbi Tunnel. This is the continuation of that wall, the Western Wall. We can walk all the way to where the Antonia Fortress was, where Jesus was interrogated by the Romans after Caiaphas' house. We got there. So you're walking along. Look at this. This is that same Western Wall, but it's underneath the city, and you're walking along it. In fact, when you're walking, and here's the wall, you're walking on the actual stones that Jesus walked on as he was on his way to the fortress. Surreal. Just some of the things. These are original columns from 2,000 plus, about 2,200 years old. And you're walking all along it. These are those original stones. And you're going to see them again. The place where Jesus was beaten was on these kinds of stones. Here is where they had thrown over the rocks. You see all this debris? That's all original. When Titus came in and destroyed the temple, they were throwing the rocks over the side. Exactly what Jesus said, not one stone upon another. They took the whole temple apart. Not the walls, the temple. That's what Jesus was talking about. They were marveling at the temple that was made by Herod. So this is, if you were able to take that, they dammed this up, or they walled this up rather, but you're in a cistern where they kept water, and this would have supplied the garrisons and all the rest of it. This is at the fortress. On the other side of that, we came in a couple of days later. On the other side of that, walked up some steps, and we were on the floor where they were beating Jesus. You're that close. Original stones. Look at how long this is. They estimate this weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 tons. How they got it in place, we still don't know for sure. These would be lifts. That's what these holes are for, but absolutely amazing. And I got to really hurry through this. I'm very, very sorry. You'll see when you get here to the Zion Gate, there are all kinds of bullet holes. They made a big commotion because further this way they wanted for the people to be able to escape. And so they missed the timing. It didn't work exactly like they wanted to, but that's why it's all shot up. And for extra emphasis, the Jews aimed at all this because it's Arabic writing. Cars were coming out of this, by the way. They went in this way and went out where it just showed you. So that car came out through here. Insane. Big cars couldn't do it, obviously. So from there we went into what they call the upper room. You can tell it's very Gothic. It's not the upper room. But you know that you're in the area where that would have taken place. So really beautiful columns. And of course, from Gothic times, then when the Muslims came in, they wanted to make it into theirs. And so they, I think this talks about how it's dedicated to, I think it's to Saladin. So anyway, as we go on. This is the Temple Institute. This is what they're putting out as a model of the temple that they want to build. So they've got it already ready. They have everything in place to go ahead and start it. These are actual usable implements. They are just ready to start the building of the temple, and these are all kosher, if you will. They can all be used. They're ready to do what they want to do. This here could be worn by the high priest. This is completely ready to go. Amazing, isn't it? This isn't just some replica. That is done to code, and it is acceptable to be used. This is what it's like walking in the old city. This is what it would have been like to live in that part of the world at that time. It's still these little tiny streets. That's considered a street in Jerusalem, in the old city. This is looking from the old city. Right behind you is the Temple Institute, and you're looking at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So you get an idea how close everything. This is called the Jewish Quarter. That archway is ancient. But these are the city streets. You just walk up. They're everywhere. It's a labyrinth of stuff. It's absolutely amazing. Come on, advance now. Really? This thing waits to the end to do this? No, I got a couple more. Oh, you got to be kidding me. Well, that's working still, so why is it not advancing? Oh, man, I am so disappointed. This is sad. All right. Well, then I'll just kind of narrate the rest of it without pictures. Darn it. Thank you. Not ever ready Duracell. Let's try it. Not going to work, but that does for sure. It's broken. Do one thing real quick. Just pull the little communicator part of it out and put it back in just in case. The other part of this. Little USB thing that just take it out, and if it resets, great. If not, I'll just tell you the rest of what we did. See if you can advance it just by hitting one of the little arrow buttons. You know, the little arrows that are on the keyboard down by the numbers. Just try and advance it that way. No, just with your finger. Just the right, left, up and down arrows by the keypad on the keyboard. It's not advancing. Okay, it's frozen. So let me just tell you what we did from this point very, very quickly. We saw some sites in the old city. We saw a place called the Herva Synagogue, which is one that's been destroyed so many times. It's magnificent to look at. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. We saw that. We saw a place called the Burnt House, which was an excavation of a house that would have been there at the time when the Romans torched it. So we had a chance to see that. We visited Caiaphas' house, the high priest at the time, and we looked down at the road. You can actually look at the stones that they would have walked up to bring him there. You can go into the jail part of Caiaphas' house, and you can see the places where they would have been able to strap the people here or off to the side. They're still there. So those stones and the rooms themselves, there's even one room where they would have put the murderers. Jesus would have been kept probably in this room. The only way in or out was through a hole in the roof. They would just lower them in or pull them out by a rope. They've since cut an access into it, but you'll stand in that room. So he was condemned to die, and that's where they put the people that had the death sentence, so it was impossible to escape. We saw that. From that point, we went and we saw the pools at Bethsaida, where the lame man was waiting for the water to stir. You can see that, and it goes down 60 to 80 feet. In various parts. We saw an amazing cathedral there. Roger sings really, really well. So you put him in those Gothic cathedrals and he starts singing, and it's very, very cool. We got into the old city. We saw where we were on the floor where he was scourged. And then you start to walk what they call the Via Dolorosa. It's not accurate. That is very much lore of the church. But what we do is get to a place called the Garden Tomb, and it's where we end everything on that last day. We get to the Garden Tomb, and what you have is a chance to get to see Golgotha, and you get to see that place of the skull. It's still there, though it's now been obscured. A bus company owns it that is Muslim-owned, and they have defaced it quite a bit, so it's hard to see, but they have a picture of it from like 50 years ago before you could... back then you could definitely see the makeup of a face. One thing that you can know, up above it there are two signs. One says that it's a graveyard dedicated to the soldiers of Allah, and the next to it is the same saying that you see all throughout Islam that says, God is not begotten, nor does he beget. Both of which are intended to be slaps at Christians, and that's fine because Jesus was not crucified on top of Golgotha. That's not where you would want to put a person that's been condemned to die because you couldn't read the plaque of their offense. It would have been this way, towards the temple right at the Damascus Road. And the reason is that you want people to be afraid and intimidated, but you also want them to be able to read the offense. So from everything that we can put together, the place of the skull would have been the backdrop. So as people would have seen Jesus close to the ground, reading the plaque, King of the Jews, behind they would see the place of the skull for the symbolism of it. Now in that, we know that from the Scripture it says that attached to it, there was a tomb in the same area that was in a garden. So wherever he was taken, and we're talking probably only a couple of 100 yards, by the time that he would have been taken from the cross, he would have just been taken to the same piece of rock where the Golgotha is, or from your perspective, the place of the skull. It goes this way and moves out this way and then around, and here's this garden that's like over in this area here. In that garden there is still a cistern that's at least a couple thousand years old and a wine press that was there where you would just be stepping on grapes and making juice. Well, we know that he was put in a place that was a garden, and you can see that it's clearly a garden. And what's there? You can take a look at it right outside in the foyer here. There is a 1st century tomb there. And so what you end up getting a chance to see with your own eyes is a very real possibility that you're looking at the actual tomb, because it's the only one that they have found in the area when they've excavated. And if not, you're definitely looking at worst a B site. I still think an A site for a number of reasons. You may actually be stepping right into the tomb that Peter and John would have run to. Imagine that one. That's how we ended our trip until we got to the airport, and then the rest of it went really bad from there. But no, I'm kidding. We will be doing a different way this time. We will be going to, we will go directly from Los Angeles to Tel Aviv on a nonstop, and the same thing on the way back. If it is at all within the ability for you to get there, and especially as I watch the world and the way that it's going and the hostility and belligerence towards Israel, I think that it's probably a good time. I think that the day is coming when Israel will have no option other than to attack Iran, and that will change things in that part of the world probably irreparably. So, whether God pulls us back yet again or whether that's the end of things, I don't know. And I have gone way, way, way over. I won't have you guys come back up. Thanks for hanging in with me. Sorry for the meltdown. And probably just as well, because I know that you guys probably all want to go home. If you have questions about the trip that's upcoming, you haven't missed your opportunity. You can still put a deposit down. You can still make it to that. And there's still plenty of time to do it. The one thing that will happen eventually, they have to get to the point where they're going to ask how many people are on our trip between all of the churches that are going. If there are not enough, we have to give those tickets back to the airline. And if somebody says, oh, I just found out that I can go, we'll try to buy those tickets back. But chances are, if any of you travel, you know the closer that you get to your departure time, the more the airlines love to jack up your rates. But if you have frequent flyer miles and things like that, and you want to put your own travel together, and you can do it for a much lesser rate, cool. You might have to do 1 or 2 stops on the way there, but they will work with you on the cost of the trip once you get there. So any questions about the trip, you can ask me afterwards. I want to release the rest of you out. If you have kids, then you can go pick them up. So with that, let's have a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Father, we thank you for getting together this evening and rejoicing in this land that is yours, that you did such amazing things through, that we can see with our own eyes and how the Bible comes alive. We pray, Father, that you would be blessed with everything that we have looked at tonight, and that you would make a way for those, whether they're here listening to what I've said or even the people that are watching us. We would ask that you would give them opportunity, make a way that they could be there so that they could see it with their own eyes. We thank you that we are in such days when we can go see it. With all the intrigue that is taking place there, it's even that much more exciting to be in that place, knowing what will happen in the very near future. We thank you. We give you praise, all the glory and honor. We pray that you glorify yourself in us. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Good night.